So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us at the third in our series of Big Think webinars for international school leaders, school owners and school groups. We're delighted you've joined us in what we hope will be a useful, informative and inspiring session that's all about thinking big about the future of international education. For those of you who have joined previous Big Thinks, you'll know the drill by now. But if you're joining us for the first time today, I'm Susie Williams of the International Schools team at Pearson, and I'll introduce you to today's speakers shortly. Again, if you've joined us for earlier Big Thinks, you'll know the drill. But before we get started, I'd just like to draw your attention to the chat and Q&A boxes. You've obviously all found the chat. But if you have any technical queries once the webinar has started, please do pop those into the chat and we'll aim to resolve them for you. And then please use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have on today's topic. There will be time at the end of the webinar for discussion, and we'll aim to get through as many of those questions as we can. Finally, to help us understand a bit more about all of you here today, we have a quick poll which will be appearing on your screens now. And in it, we'd like you to tell us, please, what sort of institution you're representing here today and what your role is. So I'll just give you about 30 seconds to complete that poll. So again, the first question is, which international school sector are you joining us from and what is your role? And that's useful because it helps us make sure that we're tailoring the content of Big Think sessions to your role and institution. Okay. Right, so the results should be appearing on your screens now. So 31% of you are joining us from an international school offering a British curriculum, 24% from a school group, and let's scroll down to what your role is. So the majority are members of the teaching team, members of senior leadership team, and principal head of school, going down in order there. You're all very welcome. I know today's session will be hugely engaging, and I will just introduce you to today's speakers. Mary Young and Eilish Commins. Mary Young has been involved in education for over 30 years, working as a teacher and teacher educator in the UK, as a global citizenship advisor for a UK education authority, and on Department of International Development projects. As if that wasn't enough, Mary taught with VSO for 4 years in Malawi and Bhutan, and worked for Oxfam Education, where she helped develop their definition of global citizenship. She's now a senior lecturer in citizenship and art at the University of Chichester, and she co-authored the book Global Citizenship, the Handbook for Primary Teaching, with today's fellow presenter, Eilish Commins. Eilish is a freelance writer, trainer, and global citizenship consultant, and co-author of Global Citizenship, the Handbook for Primary Teaching. Along with over 30 years of primary teaching experience in the UK, Eilish has led staff inset training in global citizenship in the UK and internationally, and she spent 3 years working in Bhutan in primary and teacher education. And in Nepal, she set up, coordinated and wrote curriculum resources for a refugee education project, which she has subsequently returned to in order to support the updating of the curriculum. Welcome, Mary and Eilish, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning, everyone. Hello. We want to talk to you a bit about global citizenship. That is our elevator pitch on the first slide, learning how to live sustainably and fairly in our diverse and interconnected world. We're hoping to tell you a little bit about it. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is a definition that Eilish and I used in the book that Susie has just mentioned. I'll let you read that as a definition. What we're hoping that you will see from that, if you're not already familiar with global citizenship, which you might well be, is that it's an ethos, an outlook, it's life, the universe and everything. It's not a subject matter, although it can be taught through every subject and through the whole school. Thank you. These are the basic kind of tenets of it. We've got knowledge and understanding of all of those 7 areas at the top left-hand side. I'll let you read those. This is currently what Oxfam Education are dividing the themes into, so we've used the same themes for the work we've done. Alongside that knowledge and understanding, there are the values and attitudes below: respect for people and the planet, commitment to social justice, etc. And on the right hand side, there are the skills such as critical thinking, empathy, compassion, and all of these things are working alongside each other. It's incremental learning and it's age appropriate. So that's how we would teach that. Okay, thank you. Why is global citizenship important? Well, if or not it's important depends on what you think education is for. So what do you think education is for? Maybe if you could think about this for 30 seconds and write some thoughts in the chat, please. I can see some great thoughts in the chat there. Yeah, great. I agree with all of those. Yeah, it's problem solving, preparing for life. Yeah. I mean, everything. Thanks for your contributions. Yeah. I mean, great. Absolutely great stuff that you've written. I mean, to be quite honest, I think I can't see anything so far that wouldn't come under our own umbrella of global citizenship. So all of those things, yeah, absolutely. How people become good people, how they communicate with others. I mean, it's difficult to think, how does that work through maths? But actually, what we would suggest is if you teach through a lens of global citizenship, you can raise all of these things that you have put there. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is one of the most powerful things Eilish and I have ever come across to explain, again, a reason to do global citizenship. I'm going to let you read that if you don't mind. We think that, I mean, particularly this is becoming more and more relevant because there's clearly in the UK, there's a big focus on English, maths and science, and that's good. Of course, we want children to learn that, but actually without an underpinning of social justice, of humanity, what is the point? Thank you. So we want to talk about 8 reasons to teach through global citizenship. Thank you. The first one is because many people argue that intrinsically human life is of equal worth. But what I wonder is whether this is really true. You will remember September the 11th, 2001, the terrorist attacks on New York and the appalling loss of life. Approximately 3,000 people died on that day. I don't know if you know, in New Internationalist magazine, it's a journal about world issues, what's actually going on. I would recommend it thoroughly. They put an emergency issue out in November 2001. And there was this tiny little paragraph in it that really had a big impact on me. And what it said was that on September the 11th, 2001, approximately 33,000 people died in New York in the Twin Towers. And also on September the 11th, 2001, 2,500 children died of measles. And also on September the 11th, 2001, 6,000 people died of diarrhea. And also on September the 11th, 2001, 24,000 people died of hunger. And there are several stark things about these set of figures. One is those figures, they're aggregated figures, obviously, but those figures have happened also today and every day since September the 11th, 2001. And the question is, despite the fact that we know the names of all the people who died in America, there are public ceremonies every year to commemorate them. Their names are read out, quite rightly so. Did we even know about those figures of people who are dying also today for totally and utterly preventable reasons? And if we don't know their names, if we didn't even know about them, and we don't know their names, how can we honestly say that human life across the globe is of equal worth? Because it doesn't seem to suggest that to me. So I think if that bothers us, there are things that we can do about that. And that's what we hope global citizenship can do. Thank you. So this is the second reason. The principles of global citizenship are not, it's not a niche revolutionary plot. It's basically enshrined in much international law and legislation. For instance, here are two things. I'm sure you will have come across this: the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And, you know, global citizenship is completely at the heart of these agreements and, you know, institutions like this. Thank you. Another reason is because the world is interconnected and interdependent. We rely on each other. Our actions have an impact around the world on people that we may never meet and that we don't know, but still we have the impact, and we need to know what that is. Eilish and I like this little quote by Chief Seattle here. We thought that summed it up quite well. In fact, we've done an activity based on this in one of the in the curriculum we've been working on. The pictures of the children, this is a way that we would often get children and young people to, and teachers actually, to make connections. So we would show a picture of people and we would say, how many links and connections can you make between your life and the life of somebody in the photo? And often when I've done this with, even with very small children, I remember doing this with some 6-year-old children, and they would come up with things like, they've got a nose, they've got knees. Of course, they've got laptops in this case, but one of the most poetic things a 5-year-old, when I showed a picture like this, said was, we breathe the same air. So that child is clearly going to be a poet laureate of somewhere in future. But the thing is, if you make connections first, you're starting with empathy, and that's where we want to start with global citizenship. Thank you. Another clear indication of the interdependence of the world is illustrated in this snippet of Martin Luther King's sermon. There's a longer clip, in fact an annotated one, which we didn't have time to show today, but we've clipped it onto the bottom of that slide. But I'll just let you have a quick look at that if you don't know this quote already. So that rather nicely sums up, we felt, the idea of interdependence of life. Okay, thank you. And this is the fourth point of why we would say global citizenship was important, because there are so many bigger than self problems which need collaborative working across the globe. And this is an example of a project we wanted to show you. If we could play that, please. Thank you.
When there were no trees, the wind used to dig up and erode the soil, but it is more protected now. The leaves provide compost and the canopy increases the humidity of the environment and offers some shade, so there is less need for a lot of watering. Before, there was widespread drought and hunger here. Then the tree planting took place and then a garden for the women to grow crops. It has really helped the people. Now we have 200 women working on it, and they are being paid well. Before, people used to migrate, but nowadays they just follow the line of the Great Green Wall for jobs. They no longer leave.
Before we didn't have any work, but now we have jobs, and economically it's good. The Great Green Wall is very useful to us because we grow many vegetables, and now we can buy produce more cheaply. I want to continue to work, and for our kids to work on the Great Green Wall so that they can make a future for themselves.
So we felt that was a really good example of collaboration to address, the climate crisis, and we wanted to show you that. Okay, next slide, please.
Right, so this is the fifth reason when it comes to dealing with topics and issues such as human rights, all the areas of global citizenship, in fact. You find that children are completely engaged in these topics. They want to be better informed, they want to know more, and the research supports this because even though the issues might be difficult or they might be contentious in some way, this doesn't put the children off. In fact, in some ways, it makes them more optimistic. There's a sense of they're on the road to being part of doing something about these issues. So it's a very positive thing. There was an article on the BBC website recently. Students in London, in a school in London, in year 12 and 13, and they felt that they wanted to know more about how the world works. They were interested in Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ plus rights, but they felt that as far as finding out about these things, they didn't know themselves what news was true news, and they wanted support in how do you identify what is fake news? How do you stop being misled down the wrong path? And they felt that all of these themes and these areas of global citizenship needed to be much higher up the education agenda, given greater priority. So on the next slide, it's there's this ipso mori, clearly from the statistics, that you engage the kids, the greater their involvement, the more they will also continue to pursue these areas of global citizenship and be engaged and be proactive. And that's very, very important. I'll give you a moment to look at that slide. Okay, so now we are ready for a quick poll. You can see a list there of all the possible ways of making the planet a better place, saving the planet, really. We would do this activity with Key Stage 2 children. We'd like you to put in the area that you think is most important. So about 30 seconds for that. Lots of choices there. Right, so what have we got? So we've got right across the board there, haven't we? Interesting. So fly less, 0%. Actually, bearing in mind the long haul flights, that is the area that causes your carbon footprint to be greater. So flying less would be one area to reduce. The second area that reduces is most effectively is becoming a vegetarian. And finally, not buying the things that you really don't need unless you are absolutely sure you're going to use them. But of course, we need to be doing all of this. We all need to be doing all of this. You can check out your own carbon footprint yourself. There's a website, carbonfootprint.com, and also you can look on the WWF website as well to find those things out. So next slide then, please.
So this is the 6th reason why we would say global citizenship was important, because employers value the knowledge, values and attitudes and skills that global citizenship can teach. Thank you. Next slide. Here's some examples of that. This is from an emerging issues report. These are 21st century skills. That's quite a lot of writing on the page, but if you have a look, you might notice the phrase global citizenship in the middle there. Okay, the next slide, please. Sorry, slightly rushing you through this. This is another example, a US-based group who cited 10 skills needed by students, and we're on a bit of a theme here. You can see that one in the middle, alongside a lot of others, of course, but you know, this is interesting for us that this is being identified. Okay, thank you. Next one. You'll know of UNESCO. They have a whole global citizenship education program, and it is in order to instill, as you see at the bottom, values, attitudes and behaviours that support creativity, innovation, commitment to peace, human rights and sustainable development. I mean, that's massive, you know, aspiration. But, you know, the fact that UNESCO has recognised this is, I think, really, really important. Thank you. Couple more to show you. This is the World Economics Forum. You'll know of them, meet at Davos every year. And again, if you look at the bottom bit in bold, this part really is everything that's written there is to do with global citizenship, although it didn't exactly use those words. We've got to do a bit of work there, clearly, Alish. But, you know, all of that stuff at the bottom of the page there is basic global citizenship. And this is what the World Economic Forum have said. So the 7th area, again, focusing on critical thinking, because of the need to make accurate judgments about the world. There's 3 maps here. We won't do the activity now, but this is an activity I do often with my students and with teachers when we do INSET, and we ask them, what do you make of the map projections? And the point about them is that they're your perspective, you know, whichever map. I mean, in the UK we would often say number 2 is the right one. Well, in fact, they're all right. It depends on your perspective, and every you know, if you're trying to show a globe on a flat surface, you're going to get distortion whatever you do. but the idea about maps being one, political, and two, your own perspective is quite crucial to make. The first one, just in case you don't know, is Antarctic centered. The second one is a Mercator projection. The third one is a Gall-Peters. And my students would often say the third one's upside down. Well, we are talking about a ball spinning in space. So who was to say which way up it was? It's just your perspective. And also, of course, we know maps are deeply political. So we would be showing all of these to children and saying, why are they different? What's going on? What do you make of it? Okay, thank you. Finally, and point 8, it's because of what many pupils think. You know, you will know as educators that in classrooms there's a lot of assumptions, generalizations, stereotypes that are made. This leads on to misinformation, to fear, to discrimination if it is not addressed. And discrimination, fear, and misinformation is not how you promote intercultural understanding. It is in fact the opposite. So what we would say is we need to sort out, you know, why children, what do they think, and then we can see what we need to do about that. Okay, next slide, please.
So what would this look like in a school? You need the whole school on board. You need the children involved, the teachers, the whole staff. Everyone will be learning. Everybody will be part of the journey. And we need to think a lot about what is already in our own heads. You know, we've absorbed so much in our own sort of individual life journeys. And, you know, we need to keep asking ourselves, well, where did I learn this? How reliable is what's in my head? You know, do I need to question it? Do I need to change my mind? I need to keep my mind as open as possible so that I can, you know, interject all of the information that other people have that can change my perspective. So what we've done here is just to give you an idea from one of the themes that Mary mentioned earlier, the 7 themes of global citizenship. This is from social justice, looking at justice and injustice, and this is what would be the learning objective, in fact, for each of these years. And just to sort of scout across it really, in year 1 we would be starting with like evaluating a story such as The Little Red Hen, and then in year 3 we would be looking for some local injustice, for example, you know, a playground perhaps where children might go and meet and play that was being built on, and they could sort of have a sense of what that injustice felt like. And then moving on to at the end of Key Stage 2, we in year 6 we'd be looking at Lance Armstrong and, you know, tracking the dishonesty, you know, in his life path. Then in Key Stage 3, looking at First Nations people and the sort of how racism and hatred was used to remove them from the land that was rightly theirs. An activity called the Veil of Ignorance in year 8, which is fantastic. The children have to create their own society, and then they'll be living in it and they don't know what role they're going to play. So we've really tried to you know, create a path from what this theme looks like in year 1 and how it progresses all the way to year 9. So next slide, please. We try to sum up here really the sort of broad principles of what global citizenship would look like through the lens of global citizenship. Myself and Mary spent a lot of time really trying to you know, focus on the key points here, and I want to give you a moment just to read through those. You know, we feel that these principles, that they need to be like the core and centre of any educational setting. And you know, if you get everyone on board to do this, it's very powerful and it's very exciting for everyone. Well, I think if you haven't already gathered, myself, Mary and I, we are very, very passionate about this subject. we have been engaged in this subject for over 30 years. We hope we haven't overwhelmed you in all that's been shared today, and we'd like to thank you very much for listening to us. We're finishing with a quote from Margaret Mead, because even if you do make the smallest change in your setting, then that is that's the little seed that needs to be sown. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. That was hugely interesting. I'm sure everybody has got lots of food for thought there. I would like to invite you, if you haven't done so already, to put any questions that you have for Mary and Eilish into the Q&A. We've got just under 10 minutes left, so we've got some time to probe them and ask them interesting questions about your setting or your plans, or anything that springs to mind. I will kick off, ladies, with the first question here from Sudha Rao. At what level is global citizenship best introduced?
Well, I'd like to answer that one and say, you could start in nursery. There's no reason, we've written the plans that we put in place start in year 1, but actually we would introduce elements from nursery and reception, just even if you're just starting with introducing recycling and all of those things, and making things from recycled materials, all of those aspects that they can just start to do. We wouldn't even call it global citizenship. They would just be doing it and then bring that forward to the continued years.
Brilliant. There's another comment here. Glad to see global citizenship becoming more prominent, which I think everybody on this call would agree with. Are there areas, ladies, just whilst we're waiting for some more comments to come in, are there areas that are tricky to teach through global citizenship? Are there areas that require real care and attention as to how it's delivered within the curriculum and at certain ages?
Can I make a reply to that? I think a lot of the areas we're looking at are contested. Things like discrimination, poverty, injustice of every type. I think these are tricky, and I think as an educator, you need to feel confident in order to raise the issues, because actually you don't want to crash through difficult and contested issues. But I think the main thing with global citizenship is, to enable the children, raise issues. As educators, we don't know all the answers. How can we? So let's raise the issues. Let's know ourselves a little bit about where we're going with the topic, some basic examples of what's going on, and then enable children to discuss it, think it through, change their mind. These are all very key aspects really of global citizenship. Find out more. We want the children and ourselves to be finding out more all the time. Listen to people with life experience in the areas. I mean, that would particularly be the case with discrimination, for instance. Ask people with life experience as a wheelchair user, as a Black person, as a gay person. Ask them their experience, listen, learn from them, and then that makes it much easier to teach about.
Thanks, Mary. There's another question that leads on from that, from Adam Cuevas. How should a teacher approach sensitive social issues in middle school? So I think that's specifically speaking to a certain age group of children.
Eilish, do you want to say anything, or shall I?
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, I missed the question again.
That's all right. How should a teacher approach sensitive social issues in middle school?
Well, I think you have to really, when you're choosing your subject to teach, you have to almost teach yourself first. You have to be really clear on what prejudices you might have yourself and address them, so that when you're then teaching in school, you're thinking about, you're opening your own mind up at the same time. And we have thought about a time for reflection so there's always questions for children to go over, because they will be there might be some confusion. They might have learnt something perhaps from home or from the television, and then suddenly you're putting in another thread. And so just having time to think things through, and letting the children ask the questions that are worrying them, and actually saying, well, we're going to learn this together. We're going to find out more together, and to be on the same path with them, because it is difficult. It is difficult, and however much we think we've got the facts clear and we know what the answers are, we can slip up too, and be prepared to make that mistake and correct it, really. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Mary.
I think there's often a thought that teachers, my students will say to me in insets, will say, well, we'll teach about difficult issues when they come up. But I think what we would argue is, well, why don't we teach about them anyway? Because, we want to prepare children to have thought about contested, difficult issues, which are basically real life all around them. So why wait till there's a big issue and then have to sort of firefight it? If we put the stages in place before that, that's what we would suggest to do, from, as Eilish said, from foundation stage. Definitely.
Okay. Another question, ladies, from Sudha Rao. Is the subject, so global citizenship, an examinable subject at secondary level, or is it project based? I think that's sort of a question about how you would administer any assessment for global citizenship at secondary level.
I think it couldn't be either, but I think, well, certainly we can speak for the UK, which is, it isn't a subject in the UK. It's in the curriculum and elements of it are everywhere, but it's not examinable as far as I know at the moment. Gosh, I'm probably showing ignorance here. And I know, well, Pearson have produced the GCSE, haven't they? So that's examinable, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's a poor answer.
Fine.
Sorry.
Watch this space, I think I'll say from the Pearson.
Yes.
Another question here. How do we encourage school administrators to integrate global citizenship across subject areas?
Well, I would say that we need to look at the whole school. We need to look at what's in the school brochures. How have we talked about different groups of people? What images are we using? What stereotypes do we have, as Eilish said earlier, that we need to address in how we think, how we write, how we promote other people in different cultures? So I think it goes back to the mindset. And I think there's also a big thing about walking the talk. It's all very well for us to talk about saving the planet and how children should be walking to school. And then if the teacher gets, in their huge kind of SUV and drives home, not great, because children see that. And that's where global citizenship gets personally quite challenging, because actually the children are watching what you do. And if you want to promote it, you've got to also try and act it.
That leads on really nicely to a comment that Ferdinand Iguas has put into the Q&A. And he says, establish first one's belief, and allowing oneself to consider different perspectives will make a good educator. Teaching with a heart and everything else will follow. I think that's a lovely.
Brilliant.
I will just give you a little bit of information about our global citizenship international GCSE. So Edexcel, Pearson Edexcel are launching an international GCSE in global citizenship with a preparation course book, which is due to be published this spring. So in answer to the question about whether it is an examinable assessment, yes, it will be. and watch this space for more information. I'll give you some bit more information that's just coming in hot off the press here. We're also integrating a global citizenship strand into our iPrimary and iLower Secondary curriculum from this autumn. So again, if you are a Pearson Edexcel customer already using iPrimary and iLower Secondary, watch this space for global citizenship coming your way. I have another question here. We've got about 1 minute left, so I think we've probably got time for one more question. This is from Kelvin. Please, how do we connect a world with different modes and ways of training children and with different mindsets?
Eilish, do you want to answer that? Or how do we connect the world, Susie?
With different
mindsets
and ways of training children and with different mindsets.
Okay.
Well, I think this is one of the things that Mary and I were talking about is the fact that we're having less opportunity to travel, obviously circumstances as they are. But in fact, you know, in order to learn about the world and about how life is in different places that you haven't been to, you know, you don't actually need to go anywhere. There's so much you can learn. And I think it's just trying to support children and adults as well in seeing things from different perspectives. So being very clear on, you know, your own upbringing and your own experience of life, and then really seeing from other people's perspectives and not just accepting, you know, the first image that you see from a different country that you don't know very well, and thinking that's the only image. You know, exploring every aspect, just as you would think if you would describe your own country and think about, you know, urban, rural, rich, poor, all those different aspects. You know, you need to do the same in every other country so that you just get a really broad picture in the same way that you do of your own country, and just be respectful, be open-minded, and, you know, just take the snippets that you might hear, but look for the big, true, full picture.
Brilliant.
I don't even know if I answered the question there.
Thank you very much.
The other aspect of that I was going to add was, in terms of around the world, if you go back to the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Sustainable Development Goals, every country on the planet has connected to those. So that's a good leveler in terms of different cultures, different people, different places. You know, we're all signed up to that.
Brilliant. Thank you. We're running tight on time now, ladies, so I'll draw the questions to a close. There are just a couple more in there, but I think we'll handle those offline. There's a question about running a webinar on global citizenship in a specific school, so we'll connect on that later. So I'd just like to say thank you, Mary and Eilish, and to everyone who's joined us today. Certificates of attendance and a link to the recording to this webinar will be sent to you by email tomorrow. And I will just give a quick plug for the 4th webinar in the Big Think series, a month today on Thursday, the 11th of March. This time the topic will be learner employability, and we'll be asking what makes learners employable and discussing why understanding the future of work and skills is crucial. Registration opens really soon on the Big Think webpage, so if it's not open when you go and check it now, because I know you all will, if it's not open now, do bear with us and it will be open later today. So huge thanks, Mary and Eilish, and thank you everyone for attending today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.